Thank you for coming out on a very cold night to talk about truth. Let's get this out of the way.
You can't handle the truth.
All right, we did that. Although I have to say that this statement resonates with me because Truth and I go way back. I have been pursuing her since I was a nerdy 19-year-old, thinking that I would find her. But she's a trickster, this one, Truth. So this is a very personal lecture for me. And I'll try not to make it too personal. But yeah, I was a 19-year-old looking for truth. And because of where I grew up in Tennessee, my only option really was the Bible. And so I went to graduate school to study the Bible because, you know, it has the truth. Except when you look closely at the Bible, as I did, it fell apart, at least in terms of its truth claims, for a number of reasons, including the fact that there is no Bible. It doesn't exist. So there's a problem right there. You know, there are only copies of copies of copies, and the copies that we do have are pretty well past the dates of the events, not to mention internal contradictions and external contradictions and all that. So when I did not find the truth I was looking for there, my life crashed and burned. And I still kept searching for her because what else does one do? Well, I guess you do a lot of things. I guess most people don't do that. I guess most people don't search for the truth. I don't know. But I did because I'm a weirdo and thought I could find it. Didn't find it, wrecked me because I couldn't find it. But now I'm okay because I go to Devin's therapist. No, I'm just kidding. So what this is both an academic presentation and a kind of map of my own journey, if you will. So forgive me if it's too personal, but I don't think it'll be too personal. I believe that truth has only one face, that of a violent contradiction. Georges Bataille. I don't know if that resonates with you, but that sums up my journey with truth pretty well. A violent contradiction, because it's not an idle or superficial search, this journey towards truth. You go all in. You put all your chips, or at least I did, put all your chips on this play, and I lost. Except losing is a kind of winning. We'll see. You'll see what I mean. So I was talking to Satinder beforehand, like, how are we going to approach this? It's like everybody wants to talk about this, I think, or is talking about it in 140 characters. There are sometimes more. So how do we approach it? How do we understand this topic of truth, but also how it's changed or how it seemed to have changed in the digital age with this technology that we have? So for me, I always like to do etymology because etymology is fantastic. It's a history of how we've used a word or words. And if you can determine the history of the words you've used, that's an intellectual history, right? That's a story. Etymology is a story of your understanding of these concepts. And so, oh, by the way, several of the images tonight are this amazing series of paintings called Truth in the Bottom of the Well by an artist named Géron. So you'll see she's in the bottom of a well, meaning you can't find her and she can't see you. And she holds a mirror because that's the predominant nature of truth, as we've understood it, as a kind of mirror to nature. And in fact, there's a whole philosophical approach called the correspondence theory to truth, meaning that truth corresponds to what's in the world. But that's not how we've thought about facts or truth, to be honest. So look at this. Facts. Action. Facts are actions. Wait, what? Actions. Anything done from the 1530s. So facts are what occur, right? An event, an occurrence, a deed, an achievement, a state, a condition, a circumstance, or a thing done, or to do. Only later do we get thing known to be true from the 1630s. Interesting date there, right? This is after Francis Bacon. This is Sir Isaac Newton. This is the shift from theological thinking to scientific thinking. And then it becomes thing known to be true, something that has actually occurred, okay? Now, you may remember that when last week we talked about techne, the etymology of technology, which means basically the same thing, anything done in the world, and poesis, which means to do or to make. There's this sense from ancient culture of putting something out into the world as poetry, as craft or technology, and now as fact. All right, so a fact has been, for most of the time we've talked about facts, an action, anything that's been done. Anything that's been done. Okay. There's a problem with facts. You may have noticed. But there's a philosophical problem with facts, and that is this, that there are too many of them. If facts are anything that is done, what's been done in the history of humanity and the planet? A lot. Too much. So we're already in a kind of technological quandary in that our technology sometimes exceeds our morality and our mentality. Facts on our approach to truth are too many to take into account. They're just too many. Because again, we're working not with this scientific notion of that which has been proved, but anything that is done in the world, an event, an occurrence. How many occurrences are there in the world? Too many. So that's the problem with facts. Well, so what do we do? There's truth in the well again, up to her ankles. Well, we try to create evidence for what? For a truth, for a particular understanding of the world. What does evidence mean? From Old French and directly from Latin, perceptible, clear, obvious, or apparent. From out of to see out of. What do you see out of these facts? Apparent. Evidence is apparent. So we have too many facts in the world, and we must gather them together in some sort of constellation of facts that create evidence to help us to see fully out of the facts. Evidence is to see fully out of what's available. Well, there's a problem with evidence too, right? Because evidence can be used to produce almost any truth, right? Because what you're doing is you're taking all these occurrences, all these happenings in the world, and you're excluding some of them, which is necessary, as we just saw. You have to exclude. There's too many to take in, and so you must select from them. Well, there is the problem, right? What do you select and why? More often than not, maybe 99% of the time, we select the evidence that confirms our already held belief. Confirmation bias, right? And we do that because we don't want to change. Confirm what I already believe, else I have to change. And so that's the problem with evidence, is that you can adduce evidence for almost anything. I grew up in Tennessee, across from the Southern Baptist Church, where I was shown evidence that the world is 6,000 years old, and that it was going to work out in a certain way, and that Jesus was coming back. And then there's a whole other set of evidence that shows that that's not true. In fact, most people believe, well, I don't know what most people believe. A lot of people believe what I believed then. Evidence to make apparent out of what's already existing. Here she is now, and she's pissed. Truth coming out of the well, armed with her whip to chastise humankind. All right, what does the word truth mean in Greek? It's aletheia. It's from, you may recognize the word lethe, which is a river, which means to forget. It's for the people in Dis or Hades to forget their mortal lives. So you drink from this river. So aletheia is to not forget. To not forget. And we have used this word not to mean objective, absolute truth. We have used it to mean faith or faithfulness, fidelity, loyalty, veracity, the quality of being true, pledge, covenant. Whoa, that's religious language in relation to truth. Having are characterized by good faith. Good faith. Truth is about, or at least it has been about, us having good faith versus bad faith, right? To be firm, to be solid, to be steadfast. So in a world that is bombarding us with sense data, I mean, just ordinary human sense data, sound, sights, tastes, touch, etc., we have to select. We have to do that. And we make that selection based on any number of factors, and that those selection criteria change over time for almost all of us. And then we go through these various approaches to truth, we might say. And then, having found it, or actually at every stage, being attached to the truth means being faithful to what you've chosen as evidence and as its conclusions. It's about faith. It's about loyalty, fidelity. Truth is fidelity. And in being faithful, you become steadfast. So you've got the world figured out, right? Okay, all this stuff, all these facts everywhere, all these occurrences, I have excluded most of them because you have to. And I have selected these, and from these I say, this is my truth, and here I stand. I can do no other. So said Martin Luther, for example. Here I stand, I can do no other. I am firm, solid, steadfast. Do you still hold to the truths that you initially found? And that you were loyal to? I certainly haven't. I've had more positions on truth than I've had jobs, and I've had a lot of jobs. So what does that mean? We'll come back to that. Here is poor truth, the nurturer down in the well. There's her mirror. She's not holding anymore. And she's been killed by liars and actors. right? Because that's the same thing. An actor's a liar, right? It's pretending to be someone else. Poor truth. I like the bucket there. What's the bucket about? And there's no more water, but let's not get caught up in that. What is a lie? Now, interesting, right? So remember where we've come from. Truth is about some sort of fidelity, some sort of faithfulness. What is a lie? It is to speak falsely for the purpose of misleading. From the late 12th century, to deceive, to betray. Okay? And I love this, a word of uncertain etymology. So look at this etymology of the words surrounding truth. It has to do with ephemerality, an occurrence, something that happened in the world. It has to do with selectivity of certain facts to use as evidence. It has to do with faithfulness, steadfastness to the conclusions you've drawn. And a lie is to betray that. Right? So a lie is not about some objective, or it hasn't been, about some objective concept, some truth. Lie is about knowing that you're betraying a truth. It's about intention. So all this talk of truth, whether it's from philosophers who have claimed to find the truth. By the way, philosophers, they have my journey. Almost every philosopher has gone through this path toward trying to find the truth, and most of them find it and nobody else believes it, right? In fact, everybody else spends most of their time trying to show how their truth is false. Two, whether it's just, I didn't say that, or I didn't mean that, as you have an argument with your lover or friend. It's about knowing that you're lying. It's about consciousness of your betrayal. What are you betraying? You're betraying an understanding of truth, which is, if it's not objective, if it's not out there for us to find, like poor truth with her mirror, if it's not out there, then what is it? It's an agreement among us. It's an agreement among lovers that we will say this and that and not betray each other. It's an agreement among nations that we will not deceive. It's an agreement among people in everyday life, in work, for example, to not be unfaithful to what you've agreed upon. Here's a little fable of truth that I really like. From our old friend Prometheus, a technician, a trickster, who is also a culture hero, meaning he brings culture to humanity, against Zeus's protestations. Zeus didn't want him to do that. But Prometheus, this is from Aesop, so it's much later in the mythology. But he was a potter, he was a maker, he was a poet, he was a techne, he was a technician, he created things. And so he's sculpting a statue of truth. Awesome. We need a statue of truth because it's right there and we can see it and there it is. That's truth. It's not going anywhere. It's moving. That's the kind of truth we want. That's the kind of truth we never get to have, is a statue, a frozen thing. So using all his skill, he wants to make this statue to regulate people's behavior, the text says. To regulate people's behavior. So this sense of objectivity, never really involved in truth. Truth is a weapon. It's a tool. And so Prometheus has an apprentice whose name is Trickery. And Prometheus gets a call from Zeus. Zeus says, come up, I need to talk to you about those orders. And so he says, okay, Trickery, will you take care of my workshop while I'm gone? So, fired by ambition, the text says, Trickery used the time at his disposal to create an identical figure to Truth. I love this story so much. When he'd almost completed the piece, which was amazing, beautiful statue, he ran out of clay to use for her feet. So it's almost a complete statue, almost a complete duplicate of Truth. The master, Prometheus, returns, so Trickery quickly sits down in his seat like a bad boy, quaking with fear. Prometheus was amazed at the similarity between truth and falsehood. And he wanted it to seem as if all the credit were due to his skill, Prometheus. And therefore he put both statues in the kiln, and when they'd been thoroughly baked, he infused them both with life. And sacred Truth walked with measured steps, while her unfinished twin stood in her tracks, stuck. That forgery, that product of subterfuge, thus acquired the name falsehood. And Aesop says, I readily agree with people who say that she has no feet, because every once in a while something that is false can start off successfully, but with time truth is sure to prevail. All right. We have to talk about Plato's Cave. I'm sorry if this was inflicted upon you in college or even high school, but we're going to have to go back over it. I won't spend a lot of time on it. But basically, this is book 7 of the Republic, his vision of a society. And so it includes, accordingly, how you approach truth, the role of truth in this society. And so he tells this very long allegory of this. There's a cave, and people are chained to the seats here and cannot look backwards. You see, they're being blocked. There's a fire behind them, which produces shadows. And people walk between the fire and the people seated and chained, imprisoned there. And they carry all kinds of things. And the people sitting, chained, think these are the things. What else would they think? Is that a shadow of a bird there is a bird? Because it is. It is for them. They don't know a three-dimensional bird. They don't know a bird with color in it. They don't know anything except what the shadows tell them. So they live in the world of shadows. Plato says this is not satisfactory because there's a world lit by the sun. And he asks us to imagine that someone is released. One of these people, that dude there pointing at the bird, he's released in and comes out of the cave. First of all, what's going to happen? Well, he won't be able to see because his eyes are accustomed to darkness, and he's now bathed in light and he can't see. So you see this little allegory here, right? When you're first confronted with the truth, you can't see it. That's true. And so eventually he gets his eyes adjust to the sun, and he now sees things in 3D and in color. He's no longer in the world lit by the shadows, a world of shadows. He's in a world lit by the sun. Now, here's the most interesting part of the allegory of the cave, is that the released prisoner goes back to his fellow prisoners and says, you won't believe this. and they don't. Why would they? Why would they listen to a man telling tales of color and movement in 3 dimensions in a world lit by a sun, which is like a big fire or something? Why would they believe that? And Plato says that this is most people, the people, live in and love the shadows. By the way, have you seen that hoi polloi phrase? That's being used incorrectly. It seems to be used like aristocracy, right?
No, it's actually common.
Well, I know that, and yeah, but I've seen it used like hoi polloi or like celebrities and stuff. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we have the truth. The hoi polloi is Greek for the people, just the people, the ordinary people. They live in and love the shadows. Well, I don't know if they love the shadows because there's nothing else. They have no other choice. They what? Well, they're actually chained, so they can't even move, much less read, right? That's an interesting thought. What would you do if you gave them a book? But it's an allegory, so we don't want to press it too far. Philosophers live in and love the sun. The sun here is obviously enlightenment, but for Plato, it's something very specific. It's the forms, the perfect forms of everything. And we don't have to get into this tonight because that's another thing. For example, Plato would say, if we had a chalkboard and I drew a circle, he would say, is that a perfect circle? And I would say, no, it's clearly not a perfect circle because I drew it. And he would say, how do you know that's not a perfect circle? And I would say, because I know what a perfect circle is. And he would say, how do you know that? And the answer would be, because there's a form of circle that's perfect and exists not here, somewhere else. And what I'm doing is remembering. I'm remembering my perfect form up there where I hung out with perfect circles. There's a perfect form for everything. There's a hoarseness form, all that. So that's Plato's point. That's fine. But this is about truth. Because this is all of us. We are all hoi polloi. We are all the people looking. Well, these people aren't even looking. So maybe most people aren't looking. I don't know. But I guess most people are satisfied with shadows. That's probably fair to say. What's the ending of Bull Durham? The world is made for people who are not cursed with self-awareness. All right. But truth, for Plato, apart from all that form business, is about escaping something. It's about expanding, quite literally, your horizons. And with your horizons comes understanding, and maybe truth. All right? Shadow people are so pissed off about this that they kill the sun people. And it's not hard to find examples of that, right? Almost anyone who brings you the truth of the new way of seeing puts him or herself in great danger. Jesus, an obvious example. Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, you know how this is. We do not like people to drag us out of the shadows. In fact, we will kill you for it. And in fact, Socrates, Plato's teacher, was killed for that reason. Is there any other way to approach truth? Sure. This is Socrates. It's an apple Socrates. No, okay. Sorry. Anyone heard of Socrates? Right. Because he's one of the shadow people. Plato uses him and the other Sophists, they're called, because they are foils for his hero Socrates. And so they're like the Pharisees in the New Testament. I don't know if you've ever studied the New Testament, but the Pharisees were a fairly liberal group compared to the other Jewish groups at the time. But man, they get played as these incredible assholes in the New Testament, and because you need a foil. But the Sophists' problem was that they didn't write. They were too concerned with speaking. And so we don't have anything about them, really. We have a few things, like there's Isocrates. But all we have, really, are Plato's dialogues that include the Sophists. And guess what? The Sophists lose every argument in Plato's dialogues, every argument. And they're portrayed as idiots, and, well, not as idiots, but as faulty reasoners. When in fact the opposite was true. In fact, the Sophists were, at least originally at least, driven by the Greek concept of arete, which is a high moralism. I hesitate to even use the word moralism because that's too small. It's about excellence, just excellence. And so you could express arete in the gymnasium, by being an excellent athlete, or in the home by being an excellent father, or in the agora by being an excellent business person, or of course in the Senate or in the political arena by being an excellent politician. They had these warrior virtues in that sense of being excellent in all things, and kind of, you know, the warrior in ancient Greek, he's about honor, and, well, not so much honor, it's about memory and about excelling, right? That gets converted as democracy develops in Greece into political excellence. In other words, it's a product, the Sophists are a product of democracy. Plato's Republic is about a timocracy. It's about people leading who are virtuous. The Greek word timeo, honor or virtue. So Plato did not like democracy because not everybody should lead. In fact, most people shouldn't lead. The hoi polloi should not lead. Only the philosopher king should lead. Only someone who contemplates the forms all the time should lead. Well, democracy comes to Athens, and now we have Sophists, and they are teachers for hire, right? Teachers for hire, which makes them less than for Plato and his academy and his students. How dare you take money for teaching? We'll just leave that there. And so they invented rhetoric, which is the art of persuasion. So you go from Plato and his sun people and shadow people to democracy and the art of persuasion, because democracy requires persuasion. It requires someone to persuade you of something, because you, even you hoi polloi, get to vote. So let me tell you whom you should vote for. Here's why. So there is sophistry, and if you've heard that word, you've no doubt heard it in a negative connotation. Thank you, Plato. But you use sophistry all the time. You use rhetoric all the time. Guess who else used rhetoric? Plato and Socrates. In fact, you could make the case that Socrates was the greatest sophist of all time. And you probably know the etymology of the word sophist. It's wise one. Okay, so we have this compulsion toward truth, and then we have this rhetoric. How do we make these work? We become postmodernists. Plato won that argument, again, I think because He used the technology of writing that we talked about last week. But that doesn't mean that rhetoric did not survive. As I said, Plato and Aristotle and all the other philosophers used rhetoric. You must use some sort of persuasion, even if you have the truth. You can't just hand someone the truth and say, here's the truth, nice seeing you. You've got to explain why it's the truth, and as soon as you start to do that, you're using rhetoric. You're becoming a sophist. But as you see, Plato's warning is not without merit, that as soon as you start trying to persuade someone, you are very close to lying. You are very close to betraying some sort of agreement you've made in order to get to the end that you want, in order to get elected to office, let's just say. You might use rhetoric. And rhetoric, like myth, like writing, like everything else, is a tool. It's not inherently good or bad. It can be used by good or evil, and it just as effectively. So, here we are now with postmodernism, where we have lived for millennia with Plato's truth, or at least a version of it. And what helps it along, that's too soft. What enlivens it and keeps it going is Christianity. Without Christianity, Plato's appeal to truth would not exist. We'd probably still study Plato, but we'd study him like another backwater philosopher who has no relevance anymore. But in the 4th century, when Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire, the church fathers merged their understanding of Christianity with Platonic, Neoplatonic philosophy. And suddenly, when Christ said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, he was talking about the forms, which he clearly wasn't. But that's okay, because that was their rhetorical move, is to say, all that stuff that Plato talked about, dialogue, reason, it now belongs to Christianity. We have all that. And so Christianity became philosophical in the sense of a way to truth, a way not to a contingent, a conventional agreement about what is the case, but the absolute truth that you must believe or die forever in eternal flames. That's raising the stakes, right? So this merger is amazing, and we still live with it today. And science comes along and does the same thing, or a similar thing. It presents itself from Francis Bacon to Isaac Newton on to Descartes as a way to truth. Now, any good scientist will tell you that they're not going to find absolute truth. That's an alien concept to scientists. But that's okay, because that's how the culture absorbs it. It absorbs it as a substitute for Christian theology. And hence the wars of Christianity and science begin with the Enlightenment. Because they're after the same thing, right? They're both after this objective, absolute truth that is true for everyone at every time. It's not the function of an agreement that we make. It's not socially constructed. It doesn't change. And so we have lived with these competing notions of truth for 400 years or so, until postmodernism comes along and occupies the space between the Platonists and the Sophists, millennia late, but nevertheless. Jean-Francois Lyotard, in a book called The Postmodern Condition, writes, this is the first sentence, I think, simplifying to the extreme, I define postmodern as incredulity toward meta-narratives. What's a meta-narrative? It's what?
It's some man-made story.
As opposed to?
Well, I guess a story that explains everything.
Yes, that's it. It's a narrative about narratives. And so it is the or narrative. And so there we go. It's either Christianity, which explains everything from the origin of the world 6,000 years ago, or it's science to the Big Bang. Leotard writes, I define postmodern as incredulity toward meta-narratives. Was there not incredulity toward meta-narratives before? Not really. If you're a medieval person living in Europe, I don't know what choices you had to believe. I mean, even people who didn't believe things got punished for having a vagina, for example, which is, anyway. I didn't want that to seem as random as it apparently came out, talking about witches. It may be. We don't know the life of a medieval person except externally, but it's hard to imagine, and we have very few records, if any, of people being apostate. We have plenty of records of people being punished for being apostate, but that's not the same thing, is it? I'm looking at you, Inquisition. And so, in the Middle Ages, we had Christianity. Middle Ages being from about 400 to about 1100 or 1200. And then afterwards was science, the science story, which again, people used to get at absolute objective truth. Postmodernism is where we go, what's that emoji? That's postmodernism when it comes to truth. And once we did that, sure, there were intimations of this beforehand, but once we did that, once we had just the slightest incredulity toward our meta-narratives, we began to see something new, a new truth, and that truth was power. In the discourse of today's financial backers of research, science, truth, the only credible goal is power. Scientists, technicians, and instruments are purchased not to find truth, but to augment power. James Williams writes, the narratives we tell to justify a single set of laws and stakes are inherently unjust. The narratives, the stories, the myths, the ideologies we tell to justify a single set of laws, not a single law, but a single set of laws. And so an ideology and stakes are inherently unjust. And so something new emerged into the world that we couldn't see before. And that was power and its relations and justice and injustice. Not a lot of talk of justice in the Middle Ages. Justice came after, whether you were part of the Catholic Church or not, right? It's just so hard to see these things because our understandings of truth are really blinders. Because remember, we're taking from all these facts and we're counting a certain set of them as evidence, and then we create a story. We call it true. And basically, it's a kind of blinder. It's a way of not seeing what we have excluded, right? There's a book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions that you may have read or heard of by Thomas Kuhn. Pretty old book by now, but still resonant. And he shares this story of that I love. I love this story. This experiment where this group of scientists, they wanted to test for recognition of variation or anomalies. And so they had this deck of cards, and it had a black two of hearts. Otherwise, it's a deck of cards. right? And they get people in, as scientists do, and they show them the cards. I don't know, I think it's like 6 or 8 people. They show them the cards. What do you see here? Deck of cards. It's got a black 2 of hearts. Okay, they do it again. They slow it down. Anything you see? Nope, deck of cards. I don't remember exactly. I think it's like 6 or 7 times they do this. And they slow. By the end, it's like, and eventually a few people still don't see it, but start to get pissed because they know something's wrong, but they can't see it. Why? Because we see what we believe. We see what we believe, and breaking that paradigm is incredibly difficult. In fact, we rarely do it on our own. It's usually done for us, sometimes by life, sometimes by culture, by lost loves, by lost people who die, by my story of evangelical Christianity, where it just crashed and burned, and I was left with nothing. I was married at the time. I had a son. They left. And so that's how we change. Not because we come to PRS and go, that's interesting. I believe I'll change. I mean, maybe we do that a little bit. What PRS is here for is when you're broken. And there are other places and books that are here for you when you're broken, when your paradigm has shattered and you don't know where to go. Because your truth, your agreement about what is gone. And where are you then? I love this quote. I'm not sure I understand it because it's Gilles Deleuze, and he's incredibly difficult, along with his partner Guattari. Becoming is an anti-memory. Becoming is an Remember, truth, aletheia, means not to forget. But becoming is an anti-memory. Right? So change is to change, is what he's saying. And to change is to give up what you used to have. And that is truth. To change your truth. All right. Truth in the digital age. Can you believe that was 15 years ago? Truthiness. The belief that what you feel to be true rather than what the facts will support. And I don't know if you remember this, but he used to do this segment called The Word. And he did this one called Wikiality, where he decided that the population of elephants in Africa was increasing. And so he types it into Wikipedia and he's like, see, now it's true. You know how I know? Because I read it. I read it somewhere. Truthiness, Wikiality. What has created this? How have these phenomena affected our understanding of truth? Well, first of all, in terms of rhetoric, which you cannot have truth without rhetoric, right? We saw that. Social media, contemporary technology has enhanced our voices and expanded our audience. And so, this is interesting because if you read about the development of newspapers in the 18th century, I wanted to do this. I didn't have time. I wanted to get some quotes about newspapers in London in the 18th century and how people were sneering at them. Like, what? You mean everybody can just read this? Everybody can know this? It's almost the same rhetoric. The social media has given us an enhanced voice, to be sure, I can post something right now. In fact, this talk will go out on YouTube this week, and people from all over the world will watch it or not. Most of them are not watching it. I have an enhanced voice and an expanded audience. That's the nature of the platform, right? Is to enhance your voice and expand your audience. Why? Because that gives me a perceived potential for power. You know what? Trump pissed me off, so I'm going to tweet about it. Maybe you've done that. What did you do? It's a perceived potential for power. Did you do anything by saying Trump's an idiot? Did you actually do anything? You did something for yourself, but that's another thing, right? Because I guarantee you, somewhere in your tweet, if you're complaining about Trump, well, not always, but look at the form of tweets and Facebook posts, etc. They use the conventions of truth. You can't say this without saying that, therefore Trump's an idiot. They use the conventions, but that's what rhetoric does, and that's why Plato hated the Sophists, is you have to use the conventions of truth. This is false. I can prove it. I have evidence, right? You have to use that. But remember the original etymology of the word truth, fidelity. What are you being faithful to? And lie, what are you betraying? There's a necessary increase in hypocrisy. It's built in, right? Because if you sitting here in Los Feliz tonight, tweeting about the president of PRS and what an idiot he is, and you want to tell the world, your expanded audience and your enhanced voice means you better be right. And in fact, you can never be right. Because you have 140, or now it's 280 or something, you don't have enough room to share the truth. You can only share, ultimately, what you're angry about or happy. And you use the conventions of truth sometimes to do that. But the more you do, the more chances you're going to be a hypocrite because you're swinging too far. You're swinging for the fences. You've got this expanded voice on these platforms, and it goes out to everyone. And as those things increase, your vulnerability to attack increases, right? And you must cover your bases. And in fact, what then happens is hypocrisy, pointing out hypocrisy becomes a virtue. And it's also freaking easy to do, right? Truth in the digital age takes the form of the medium. Truth takes the form of the medium, as it always has. The very notion of truth as an objective, even absolute quality is a product of our technology of writing. We talked about this last time. Oral cultures do not have a sense of truth as absolute, objective. Truth for them has always been and will always be subjective, experiential. Truth itself is a product of the medium of writing. There is no abstraction, for example, without writing. Now, I told you the story last time of the anthropologist who was asking the oral peoples to define a tree, and all they said was, "You don't know what a tree is? That's a tree." Well, that's also not a definition, right? Because it's not abstracted out of existence. It's not written. And now, in the digital age, our truth has taken the form of Twitter and Facebook and other media. And the medium is the massage. I know you think I misspoke, but if you know your McLuhan, you know that he actually put out a book called The Medium is the Massage. I believe the story is, I don't know if it's a true story, that there was a printer misprint. And so he got the galleys back and it said, the medium is the massage. And he said, yes. Of course, you may know him as saying the medium is the message, which he hated. Anyway, let's not get into McLuhan's psychoanalysis. But the medium is the message. It is form communicates. Sure, there's content in there, but I would even argue that content is subsumed under form, but we can get into that later. What does this mean? It means that if you treat Twitter, let's say, or any fake news, if you argue with it, you are substantiating its claim to truth. This is what I don't understand. I try not to be a crotchety old man. But I think if the things the president said, if this had happened in my youth, people would not listen because it would be so patently false. And so you're dismissing someone because they are outside our consensus. We've agreed that truth is this set of facts, right? Obama was born in Hawaii. We understand this, and we have conventions for determining that. And so if someone came along and said, so-and-so, I don't know, I think he might be a Muslim. I don't think he's an American citizen. We would have just ignored it because it wasn't a real truth claim. But now it's treated like a truth claim. And so there are podcasts and cable news, etc., that spend hours and hours debunking Trump's statements. Okay, that means you think he's in the game. You're legitimizing him. And you're by saying that what he says is false. You think he's making a truth claim. He's just a sophist. He's not making a truth claim. He's trying to get you to do something. And so you don't have to engage in that. You can just dismiss something that is patently false. And so I would say what we have here is not a crisis in truth, because truth is a consensual collective agreement about what is the case. What we have is a crisis in language and how we use language. And so someone who is spewing falsehoods, and we say you're spewing falsehoods, we're not doing anything anymore. What do I mean? Simply ask someone to define their terms. I've been waiting for 3 years for someone to ask Trump, what do you mean by X? How do you define Y? But we don't do that because that's not the game. It's a language game, not a truth game. All right, oh my goodness, I'm still going. I don't know if you'll remember this, but it's haunted me since 2004. This is Ron Susskind, a reporter. This is an article called Face Certainty in the Presidency of George W. Bush in the New York Times. And he's speaking to an official, unnamed White House aide. Everybody now thinks that was Karl Rove. Do you remember Karl Rove? Okay. The aide said, this is Susskind writing, the aide, Karl Rove, said that guys like me were in what we call, Rove and the Bush cabinet, Bush administration, in what we call the reality-based community, which he defined as people who, quote, believe that solutions emerge from your judicious study of discernible reality. In other words, the history of Western culture, including philosophy, theology, and science. Rove, or whoever, continues, that's not the way the world really works anymore. We're an empire now. And when we act, we create our own reality. And while you're studying that reality, judiciously as you will, we'll act again, creating other new realities, which you can study too. And that's how things will sort out. We're history's actors, and you, all of you, will be left to just study what we do. Truth. All right, what do we do with this? How do we get wisdom from our conflicted, compatible relationship with truth, especially in the digital age when truth has taken the shape of the medium? Remember that it's about intention. Lying is about intention. What do you want to do here? Truth is about intention. What do you want? What do you want? That's why we need a basic philosopher somewhere saying, what do you mean by Muslim? How are you understanding Muslim? How are you understanding crooked? How are you understanding fake news? What do you mean by those words? That's why I say it's a crisis in language. Nobody asks, but a first-year philosophy student would do that. And so we must say, what is your intention? Are you trying to hurt people? Are you trying to lie? Okay, why are you trying to do that? Not, I see you lied. They know they lie. It's a feature, not a bug. And you're not doing anybody any favors by pointing out the bug. Intention. We must determine intention. And from that intention, if there is good faith, or at least not bad faith, we can create a dialogue. And dialogue is how we learn and know everything. Even Plato knew that. That you needed two to get to one. That you needed a back and forth. And in the 20th century, Mikhail Bakhtin, the Russian philosopher, put dialogue at the center of his philosophy because it incorporates the other. Not just incorporates the other. Dialogue means that the other has a set of facts, certain evidence, and certain truths that I can't see. And you know what? My intention is not to debase this person, this other. My intention is to learn. And therefore, I must hear and see what she sees that I can't see behind me. I must do that. Dialogue. If you have dialogue, and if you have enough people who dialogue, such as at PRS on a Tuesday night, you create community. A precious resource. I don't know if it's dwindling, but it sure has, it's in the bottom of the well with truth, you know. And from that, from determining intention, engaging in dialogue with good intention, good faith, we might even say, and the creation of community comes consensus about what is the case. And again, if you go to the absolute, you're screwed. If you say, based on our good intentions and our dialogue and our community, if you say we have the truth, you're done. It's over. If we were to say this tonight, if we were to go out into the world and say, you know what we do on Tuesday night? It's the truth. It's the absolute truth. You better believe it. Or else. We're done. You can't do that. We need excellence. We need arete. We need what the Sophists had, that sense of excellence, which means transcending yourself, right? Not protecting your small vision of the world, your evidence that you've gathered from thousands and millions and billions of facts. It's so small, why would you defend it? We need excellence. We need to surpass ourselves. We need to understand that truth is created, not discovered. And there are responsibilities in that creation. We did it. It's ours. It's a cop-out if you think truth is out there and you're waiting for someone to find it. Truth is in you, and you own it, and you're condemned to it. Like Sartre said, human beings are condemned to be free. You're condemned to find the truth for you and for us. And so what this really is, I think, and again, this is my personal journey, what I thought was truth was really meaning. What meaning? I want a way to understand my life that I can put into a story that has a beginning, a middle, and maybe even an end. But it certainly has the present, and it orients me in place, in time. I need a story. And you know what? There can be only one truth. If it's absolute and objective, there can be only one. But if what we're looking for in this process of sifting and collecting and being faithful to what we find, if what we're looking for is meaning, there can be as many meanings as there are people. In fact, there can be more. Because throughout one's life, how many meanings do you have? I've had about 30 philosophies, beliefs I've inhabited. I want that freedom. I don't want to be constrained by someone telling me I've been wrong in 29 of those 30 worldviews. I need to fail. I need to find my way. And that means very simply being open versus closed. Truth is a way to shut the door, at least the way we understand it and use it. I mean, and that's why it's so perfect for a medium like Twitter. You don't have to spend a lot of time. You can take 10 minutes, if that, shut the door on somebody. I see it all the time. You probably do too. Maybe you've done it. I've done it too. Because the medium commands it. You're an idiot. Here's why. Shut the door. There was a German philosopher named Weihinger who kind of played on Immanuel Kant's notion of as if. And I love this, als orb, as if. You live as if. You live, you take the facts, you collect them and produce evidence, and you come up with the truth as if it were true. You're going to do this anyway, right? No matter what you say about truth or absolute or not, or my truth, screw you, this is my truth. Doesn't matter. You're going to act as if. You're going to create a fiction of this truth, and you're going to test it out. And it's going to work, maybe for a while, but then it's going to stop working. And that's the beauty. That's Immanuel Kant, right? Who's a rigorous analytic philosopher who said, let's live as if. And then here is, and in conclusion, our founder, Manly Hall. I don't know how true this is because I found it on the internet. On being asked what is truth, Manly Hall answered, well, that question Jesus refused to answer, and he's right. If you remember in the Gospel of John, he's before Pilate. Jesus is talking to Pilate, and Jesus says something about the truth, and Pilate, who I will always see as David Bowie from Last Temptation, says, what is truth? And Jesus doesn't answer him. The term is just too big. We play with it too much. I love this line. We play with it too much. The truth of the thing is the reality of it, and the realities are all more or less concealed in a world of causation. And all we get are their shadows in this world. I think the only way the individual can really come to know the truth in its fullness is to become one with it. Thank you for your attention.